It was meant to be a headline-making appearance, but one rooted in calm conversation. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, returning to daytime television to sit across from Tamron Hall in what was marketed as an unfiltered, fearless, and friendly interview. The cameras opened to a smiling Tamron, the studio lights gleaming across the polished stage, her voice full of welcome. Meghan entered gracefully, dressed in a sleek white blouse and soft tan trousers, waving gently to the audience, who applauded enthusiastically. At first, the conversation was smooth. They discussed her children, her new podcast season, and her involvement with community literacy projects. Tamron asked thoughtful, measured questions. Meghan answered with her familiar blend of confidence and delicacy, but the tone subtly shifted when Tamron introduced the topic of public criticism. "There's been a lot of commentary," she began carefully, "that you speak your truth loudly, but push back hard when others try to speak theirs. Do you think that's fair?" Meghan blinked slowly, then responded with measured diplomacy. "Everyone is entitled to their truth, but not everyone faces the same consequences when telling it." Tamron nodded slightly, but didn't let it go. But Meghan, Tamron said, with her voice slightly sharpened, "Isn't there a line between telling your story and discrediting others? When you said members of the royal family were concerned about your child's skin color, do you understand why people felt that accusation was explosive without names or details?" The studio fell quieter. Meghan shifted in her seat. "What I said was based on a real experience," she said. "I wasn't accusing anyone without basis. I was protecting myself and my son from further harm." Tamron pressed further. "But you've built an entire platform, now books, podcasts, media deals, and speaking out against a system. Do you feel responsible for the division that's followed?" Meghan's tone cooled slightly. "I think if telling the truth divides people, that's not on myths, on the people who want silence instead of change," the audience murmured. Tamron raised her eyebrows slightly, and with a clear edge said, "Or maybe it's the way the truth is packaged that divides." Meghan paused, then responded, "Or maybe it's easier to critique the messenger than fix the message." Tension cracked through the stage like lightning. For the first time during the interview. Meghan's body language shifted from open to guarded, her hands, previously resting calmly on her lap, now interlocked tightly. Tamron's delivery.com, yet unrelenting, didn't allow the tension to ease. "You've said you're misunderstood," she said, "but when every article, every appearance, every soundbite comes with a narrative of you versus the world, don't you think at some point it becomes performative?" Meghan stiffened. "I don't think survival is performative," she replied. "I think refusing to be crushed by public scrutiny is resilience." Tamron nodded slowly. "But doesn't that require accountability too? You left the royal family, yes, but you didn't leave the spotlight. You created a new one." Meghan looked directly at her. "Why should stepping away from a toxic institution mean I should step away from my voice? That logic is part of the problem." Tamron's next words were ice-sharp. "Some say that voice has turned into a brand of victimhood." Meghan's mouth parted slightly in disbelief. "If speaking out about trauma makes people uncomfortable, maybe the discomfort is necessary," she said. The audience was now fully silent. The usual studio warmth replaced by a cold current of confrontation. The interview had clearly shifted from a morning chat to a verbal chess match. Tamron sat upright, no longer smiling. Meghan's expression turned stony, composed yet visibly perturbed. "You're very good at controlling narratives, Meghan," Tamron said, "but some believe you control them so tightly that others involved family, staff, institutions are flattened in your story." Meghan inhaled slowly. "Narratives are controlled when others silence you. I'm simply reclaiming my own voice." Tamron didn't flinch. "Is it still your voice when it's monetized?" That line hit hard. Meghan leaned forward. "Let me be clear," she said slowly. "No one questions a man for turning pain into purpose or income, but a woman does it, especially a woman of color, and suddenly she's opportunistic. That's the real double standard." A few people in the audience clapped awkwardly, unsure if applause was appropriate. Tamron's expression didn't change. "So you don't see any contradiction in saying you want privacy and then producing docuseries, memoirs, and interviews?" Meghan's tone grew frostier. "Privacy isn't about disappearing. It's about control, about choosing when and How you share your life. Tamron leaned back. Or control over perception. Meghan's lips parted as if to answer, then paused. Her silence spoke volumes. Asterisk. The moment had gone beyond uncomfortable, it was unraveling. Offstage, producers exchanged anxious looks. Meghan's team, seated just out of frame, were clearly shifting, some whispering to each other, one reaching for a phone. Tamron, aware of the rising stakes, turned to the audience and said, "Let's be clear. We invited Meghan here to speak freely, and that's what's happening." Then, turning back to her guest, she said, "But I also reserve the right to question what that freedom means when it's carefully curated." Meghan shook her head slightly. "What you're doing now," she said tightly, "isn't questioning. It's undermining." Tamron blinked. "No, it's called accountability." Meghan looked away for a brief moment, then back at Tamron with a look colder than ever. "This is clearly not a conversation anymore. It's an ambush. I've sat through worse, but I won't do it twice." The words landed like a slap. Tamron folded her hands. "Then maybe this isn't the platform for you." Meghan straightened in her seat, unclipped her mic with deliberate slowness, and stood. The crew scrambled. Tamron simply watched. Meghan turned to the audience, gave a terse nod, and exited the set. The camera lingered on Tamron's face, still expressionless, before cutting to commercial by the time the screen faded to commercial. The internet was already burning. Clips of Meghan standing up mid-interview. Within 15 minutes, hashtags like #Meghan walks out, #TAMRON unfiltered, and #Duchess unplugged were trending across X, TikTok, and Instagram. On Reddit, the video was already dissected frame by frame, users arguing over whether Meghan had been provoked or whether Tamron had simply done what most interviewers were afraid to, challenge royalty. Backstage, producers scrambled to regain control. Tamron remained composed in her dressing room, sipping from a tea mug while her assistant read aloud trending headlines. Meghan, ambushed on live TV, read one: "Tamron Hall turns into prosecutor." Another called it the moment daytime TV stopped being safe. Calls from news outlets flooded both Tamron's and Meghan's PR teams, each desperate for statements, clarifications, or if lucky, exclusive follow-ups. But neither woman was in a mood to explain. Meghan had already been whisked into a waiting black SUV, her expression shielded behind oversized sunglasses. Inside the car, she scrolled her phone silently, reading both praise and venom. She knew this moment would define her for months to come. Asterisk, across New York. At NBC headquarters, executives debated how far they'd allow this to go. The Tamron Hall show had always been popular, but rarely explosive. Meghan, on the other hand, was a magnet for headlines, polarizing but profitable. There were calls to spin the situation as a conversation cut short, but others argued transparency was the best route. Tamron's team insisted the interview would air in full, unedited, just as it happened. Meghan's camp pushed back hard. They accused the show of baiting and exploiting trauma for ratings. By noon, a legal letter had already been drafted, requesting that certain parts be cut to risk future legal action. Tamron, when told, refused flatly. "Let the world see," she said. "I didn't kick her off. She walked." Meanwhile, daytime talk rivals like The View and The Talk were gleefully preparing segments dissecting the confrontation. Even late-night hosts were seen rewriting monologues to include jabs and jokes. The story had leaped from morning chat to cultural event. Both women had issued carefully crafted statements. Meghan's team called the experience a disappointing ambush under the guise of empathy, stating she had been misled about the tone and direction of the interview. Tamron's camp responded quickly, saying, "The Tamron Hall show stands for direct, honest conversations even. When they get uncomfortable, they emphasize that Meghan was never asked to leave and that she chose to walk off." The divide between the statements only deepened public opinion. Celebrities chimed in, some defending Meghan's boundaries, others applauding Tamron's fearlessness. Oprah, notably silent, became the focus of speculation. Would she defend Meghan again? Or was the tide finally turning? Meghan's allies began pushing the narrative that Tamron had been harsh to elevate her own platform. Tamron's defenders accused Meghan of expecting softballs and storming out when she didn't get them. The press lapped up every word, pushing Headlines like Meghan's new royal meltdown in Tamron Hall just became daytime's toughest voice. Asterisk for Meghan, the fallout was more complicated than she